41. Often during this period, Agricola was denounced to Domitian behind his back and acquitted behind his back. His danger did not arise from any charge against him or any complaint from a victim of injustice, but from the emperor's hatred of merit, Agricola's own fame, and that deadliest type of enemy, the singers of his praises. And indeed, the fortunes of Rome in those ensuing years were such as would not allow Agricola's name to be forgotten. One after another, armies were lost in Moesia, Dacia, in Germany, and Pannonia, through the rash folly or cowardice of their generals. One after another, experienced officers were defeated in fortified positions and captured with all their troops. It was no longer the frontier and the Danube line that were threatened, but the permanent quarters of the legions and the maintenance of the empire. So, as one loss followed another, and year after year was signalized by death and disaster, public opinion began to clamor for Agricola to take command. His energy and resolution and his proven courage in war were universally contrasted with the general slackness and cowardice. It is known that Domitian's own ears were stung by the lash of such talk. The best of his freedmen spoke out of their loyal affection, the worst out of malice and spleen, but all alike goaded on an emperor who was always inclined to pursue evil courses. And so Agricola, by his own virtues and by the faults of others, was carried straight along the perilous path that led to glory. 42. At length the year arrived in which he was due to ballot for the proconsulship of Asia or Africa, and the recent execution of Civica was both a warning for Agricola and a precedent for Domitian. Agricola was approached by some of the emperor's confidants who had been instructed to ask him outright whether he meant to take a province. They began by hinting at the attractions of peaceful retirement, went on to offer their help in getting his excuses accepted if he wished to decline, and finally, throwing off the mask, prevailed on him by persuasions and threats to go to Domitian. The emperor had his hypocrite's part prepared. He put on a majestic air, listened to Agricola's request to be excused, and after granting it, allowed Agricola to thank him without even a blush for such an odious pretense of granting a favour. He did not, however, assign him the usual proconsular salary, which he himself had granted in some cases. Perhaps from annoyance that Agricola had not asked for it, perhaps from an uneasy conscience, not wishing people to think he had bribed him to decline when in fact he had forbidden him to accept. It is an instinct of human nature to hate a man whom you have injured. Yet even Domitian, though he was quick to anger, and his resentment all the more implacable because he generally tried to hide it, was softened by the self-restraint and wisdom of Agricola, who declined to court, by a defiant and futile parade of independence, the renown that must inevitably destroy him. Let it be clear to those who insist on admiring disobedience that even under bad emperors men can be great, and that a decent regard for authority, if backed by industry and energy, can reach that peak of distinction which most men attain only by following a perilous course, winning fame without benefiting their country by an ostentatious self-martyrdom. 43. The end of Agricola's life, a grievous blow to us and a sorrow to his friends, affected even men outside his own circle and complete strangers. The general public, usually so absorbed in their own concerns, flocked to his house to make inquiries, and in the public squares and wherever people met for conversation he was talked of. When his death was announced, no one was glad and no one quickly forgot him. Sympathy was increased by a persistent rumour that he had been poisoned. For my own part, I would not venture to assert that there is any positive evidence. However, throughout his illness there were more visits from prominent freedmen and court physicians than is usual with emperors when paying calls by proxy. This could have indicated genuine concern, or it may have been spying. All accounts agree that on the last day, as he lay dying, every change in his condition was reported by relays of couriers, and no one could believe that tidings need have been brought so quickly if they were unwelcome to the emperor. However, Domitian made a decent show of sorrow. His hatred of Agricola no longer made him uneasy, and he could always hide satisfaction more convincingly than fear. It was no secret that on the reading of Agricola's will, which named Domitian as co-heir with his good wife and his loving daughter, the emperor was much pleased, taking it as a sincere compliment. His mind was so blinded and vitiated by incessant flattery that he did not realize that no good father would leave property to any emperor except a bad one. 44. Agricola was born on 13 June in the third consulship of the Emperor Gnaeus, and died in his 54th year on 23 August in the consulship of Caledonia and Procinus. As to his personal appearance, in case the interest of posterity should extend to such a matter, he was good-looking rather than striking. His features did not indicate a passionate nature. The prevailing impression was one of charm. There was no difficulty about recognizing him as a good man, and one could willingly believe him to be a great man. Though he was taken from us in the prime of his vigorous manhood, yet, so far as glory is concerned, the longest span of years could not have made his life more complete. He had fully attained those true blessings which depend upon a man's own character. He had held the consulship and bore the decorations of triumph. What more could fortune have added? He had no desire for vast wealth, and he had a handsome fortune. He died while his wife and daughter yet lived to comfort him, and we may justly count him even fortunate who, with his honours unimpaired at the height of his fame, leaving kinsmen and friends secure, escaped what was soon to come. Though he was not permitted to see the dawn of this blessed age and the principate of Trajan, a consummation of which he often spoke to us in wishful prophecy, yet it was no small compensation for his untimely cutting off that he was spared those last days when Domitian, instead of giving the state a breathing space to recover from one blow before the next fell, rained them upon its head so thick and fast that its lifeblood was drained as though by a single mortal wound. 45. Agricola did not live to see the Senate house under siege, the senators surrounded by a cordon of troops, and that one fell stroke which sent so many consulars to their death, so many noble ladies into banishment or exile. Only a single victory was credited as yet to Charismetius. The four walls of the Albion fortress still kept Messalinus's bellow from reaching our ears, and Massababius was still a prisoner in the dock. But before long we senators led Helvidius into prison, watched in shame the sufferings of Mauricus and Rusticus, and stained ourselves with Senesio's innocent blood. Even Nero used to avert his eyes, and though he ordered abominations, forbore to witness them. The worst of our torments under Domitian was to see him with his eyes fixed upon us. Every sigh was registered against us, and when we all turned pale, he did not scruple to make us marked men by a glance of his savage countenance, that blood-red countenance which saved him from ever being seen to blush with shame. Happy indeed were you, Agricola, not only in your glorious life, but in your timely death. We have the testimony of those who heard your last words, that you met your fate with a cheerful courage. You seemed glad to do your best to acquit the emperor of blood guiltiness. But your daughter and I have suffered more than the pang of a father's loss. We grieve that we could not sit by your sickbed, sustain your failing strength, and satisfy our yearning for your fond looks and embraces. We should surely have received some last commands, some words to be engraved for ever on our hearts. It was our own special sorrow and pain that through the accident of our long absence we lost him 4 years before his death. All more than all, dear father, was assuredly done to honour you by the devoted wife at your side. Yet some tears that should have been shed over you were not shed, and, at the last, there was something for which your dying eyes looked in vain. 46. If there is any mansion for the spirits of the just, if, as philosophers hold, great souls do not perish with the body, may you rest in peace. May you call us, your family, from feeble regrets and unmanly mourning to contemplate your virtues, for which it were a sin to mourn or lament. May we honour you in better ways by our admiration and our praise, and if our powers permit, by following your example. That is the true honour, the true affection of souls knit close to yours. To your daughter and widow, I would suggest that they revere the memory of a father and a husband, by continually pondering his deeds and sayings, and by treasuring in their hearts the form and features of his mind rather than those of his body. Not that I would forbid likenesses of marble or of bronze, but representations of the human face, like the face itself, are subject to decay and dissolution, whereas the essence of man's mind is something everlasting, which you cannot preserve or express in material wrought by another's skill, but only in your own character. All that we loved and admired in Agricola abides, and shall abide in the hearts of men through the endless procession of the ages. For his achievements are of great renown. With many it will be as with men who had no name or fame. They will be buried in oblivion. But Agricola's story is set on record for posterity, and he will live.